Case Strategy Simplified. It's Japheth, really excited to be with you today for this breakdown of the BCG Online case. I'm going to discuss with Shane, who recently went through the BCG recruiting process, crushed his internship, received a full-time offer. He's going back to the firm soon. But in this episode, we're really going to kind of detail what you can expect for the online case, this online assessment that BCG is using. So we're going to share what to expect, tips to prepare, mistakes to avoid, and how you can set yourself up for success in the long run with BCG. Enjoy. Shane Muselmann, welcome to the podcast. You are a content intern here with Management Consultant, but you're a lot more. And so can you just go ahead and introduce yourself, your background, and where you're heading into consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, Japheth. I'm excited to talk through some specifics about BCG and the online case. My background, I got my degree in chemical engineering at the University of Oklahoma. After that, moved into kind of a niche space within consulting, doing tech implementation projects in the oil and gas space. Decided it was time to go get the MBA and kind of move on to a slightly different path than consulting, and go the strategy consulting route. And so decided to apply. Ended up getting into UVA's Darden School of Business. Currently a second year at UVA, and I spent my this past summer interning in the Dallas office for Boston Consulting Group, and I'll be heading back to Boston Consulting Group once again in the Dallas office after graduation.
Okay, that's a great overview. Wonderful. Well, really looking forward to this conversation around the BCG Online case. And specifically, today we're going to talk about three things. One is, what does BCG utilize the case? Number two is what candidates should expect. Number three is how they can prepare, and excited to get your kind of tips and resources from your recent experience with the online case. So let's just dive right in. So can you just start off by explaining, we get this question every day, but why does BCG utilize this type of online assessment? Like, what's their rationale? What are they testing for?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. It's definitely a little different than things that you see for other firms. I really think that the root of the reasoning for them to use this case, and I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems like they're really wanting to find a way to expand the candidate funnel to make sure that they've assessed as many potential candidates as possible without exhausting a lot of human capital. So this makes it easy for them to really get a case assessment of a lot of different students from different backgrounds, different schools, without having to exhaust human capital on that place or at that place. It also kind of provides an opportunity for students that maybe don't do quite as well on the networking side of things to allow themselves to stand out from the pack a little bit based on more of their qualitative and quantitative skills. The networking piece is a huge part of consulting, but it's nice that there is another way for someone to try to stand out prior to getting to the interview stage. And this is kind of just an additional piece that they use in a holistic overview of an applicant's profile, and just adds another data point that they can use to make sure they're bringing in the best candidates. Sure.
So in a sense, it's leveling the playing field a little bit for certain candidate groups who may not have the resources or the kind of know-how. Okay, well, that's a great overview of why BCG utilizes this. The next question is, what kind of skills does BCG test for in the online case? My understanding is that they're looking for pretty much the same skills that they test for in the traditional case interview. Is that true? And if it is, how can candidates display those skills in an online environment?
Yeah, I think it's really the main three skills that you see that the interviewer is really looking for during a normal case. You're going to need to be able to problem solve, and to be able to do that in a structured way, to go through critical thinking, and you're going to do that through just kind of cycling through different answers on the more qualitative side of things throughout the case, and then also your communication. So although it's not quite like a normal case where there's a lot of communication throughout, there will still be areas for you to either give short answers or record a video of you giving a recommendation that still involve a little bit of using those communication skills. As far as how you can do each of those, on the problem solving side of things, you're going to have both qualitative and quantitative questions. You're really going to have to think very critically about those questions and think very specifically into how exactly you move on to the next step. Similar to a normal case, you're really thinking through, okay, here's my problem. What do I need to really get to the bottom of this problem that's brought up in the prompt? And then how do I continue to move forward through the questions? What kind of thinking that next step ahead? It's going to feel a lot like a normal case interview in that sense. The communication side, I think, is the one that's the most different, but you still get the opportunity to express it here. You're going to have some questions that are just going to ask for your thinking, whether it's on the qualitative multi-choice answers that you did or on the quantitative math section, just an opportunity for you to explain your reasoning. I think being able to communicate that in a way that is very succinct and gets the point across, but also shows that you're on the right path as far as your thinking is really important. And so I think the communication piece is different, but they definitely are still looking for those skills of being able to be concise, but get the entire message across, whether that's in your the answers that you're typing into the short answers or on the recommendation itself.
Okay, Shane, I really appreciate the color on that. I think it's going to be really helpful for folks as they're going through the process. Okay, so we've covered why BCG utilizes the online case and what they're testing for and how candidates can kind of display those skills. Now let's get to the question that everyone's asking. What can candidates expect? Like, what are they getting when they start going through this BCG online case?
Yeah, so it's going to be an online case with a chatbot, which sounds a little weird, but it's essentially just imagine going through the different pieces of a case, but in a slightly different way. You're going to be given a prompt. You're going to have some options to do things that are very similar to making your clarifying questions. You're building out a framework. And then past that, you're going to be asked some multiple choice questions, text input questions, short answer, just kind of explaining maybe some reasoning behind qualitative or quantitative answers. And then you're going to finish it out with a video response. The test itself, I believe this year is going to be about 35, or the case itself is going to be about 35 minutes. So anticipate getting in there for 35 minutes, really being kind of locked into a couple different questions and needing to get through those within the allocated time. So it is a little bit different from a normal case in that aspect where you do have a clock there. And then the case has kind of evolved every year from what I've seen. And so it's tough to understand exactly what the format's going to be like, but I think, it's still going to have that general feel of just multiple choice text and then a final video response to round it out.
Okay, Shane, that's really insightful and is helping me also picture a little bit of what this is going to be like. So you've explained what the case is. In your mind, you mentioned the timer. Are there any other ways that the online case is different from a traditional case interview? Obviously, there's the chatbot aspect of it, but is there any other ways you'd quantify the kind of difference?
Yeah, so I think the timer is a little bit different. Other than that, the recommendation was something that they caught me off guard a little bit whenever I was going through the case. I had done a lot of practice cases, either via Zoom or in person with other first years or second years at Darden, and felt like I was really prepared to just give a recommendation on the spot. But when you're, sitting at home in your room talking into a computer, it feels a lot different than giving a recommendation kind of to someone where you can get, facial expressions that are changing and you're getting some sort of feedback. Whereas when you're just staring at yourself in the computer, it's really different. I would definitely recommend that students practice that a little bit, maybe get an idea for how they feel there and how the timing feels and how it feels to see a timer while you're giving a recommendation. It's definitely a different feel than the online case. Other than that, I felt like a lot of it was very similar. Yeah, that was the only part that I really felt didn't feel like I was just going through a normal case.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm excited for in a few minutes to get some of your tips for preparation for this. Will every candidate receive the same prompt, or does that kind of get switched up each time?
Yeah, so my understanding is that every candidate will see a very similar prompt, if not the same prompt. And then one question that I've been asked is that each question after that does not really depend on your answer to the previous question. So if you were to get something wrong earlier on in the case, because the questions come in order, there's not like it doesn't take you down a different path based on how you answered the question. Yeah. So going the wrong way at the beginning isn't going to really like cost you down the line as far as getting different prompts or not seeing things. So it will guide you in the same way that it was planning to all along. And if you feel like you didn't get an answer right before that, there's still plenty of time to make up for that. It's not an easy case by any means. So you just go where the interviewer, or in this case, the chatbot, is leading you.
Sure. You mentioned, going down a wrong path won't set you off. Are there any kind of common mistakes that you see people make with either preparing or actually during the online case?
Yeah, one of the toughest ones is that a lot of these answers that they give you, like the answer choices to multiple choice questions, are correct. Like in some form or another, they are something you would need, or like there is a way in which the candidate could need that information. The key distinction here, and I would say this is probably like one of my number one tips I would give, is to really, really look at the question that's being asked and specifically pull the answers that are best for answering that question. I also think when you're doing that, want to make sure that you're taking like the highest level question possible. So if they're asking about, maybe like cost savings for a business overall, and another answer is cost savings in a very specific segment of the business, go with the overall answer, because that's going to be inclusive of the other answers as well. So that's kind of a small piece of it, but I think that's where we see a lot of mistakes, is trying to get a little bit too specific, or giving answers that aren't specific to the question that is being asked within the prompt or within the follow-up question.
Sure. Okay. So kind of make sure you're asking the exact question that or make sure you're answering the exact question you were asked, and also if you're given the option of doing high level and kind of more in the weeds, it might make sense to go with the high level answer there. Okay. That's really helpful.
Exactly.
We'll be right back after this quick message. Are you targeting firms like McKinsey, Bain, Deloitte, BCG, or Accenture? Then join our Black Belt program. Black Belt is a structured case prep program that combines expert coaching with a self-paced prep curriculum. You'll get 8 hours of one-on-one coaching with a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG consultant, and unlimited digital materials and homework will assign you in between sessions to accelerate your progress. And finally, resume and cover letter edits to ensure you get the interview. 80% of Black Belts who complete the program land at least one offer inside consulting. If you're ready to land your offer and change your career trajectory, join Black Belt today. Link in the show notes to learn more. All right. Well, last question before we get into more of the how to prep for this is, how does BCG evaluate candidates? Is it the same as a normal case, or do they have a different evaluation process?
Yeah, I would think about it as very similar to a normal case. You're going to have the opportunity to go through the steps we talked about with the problem solving, critical thinking, and communication. The way they're going to judge it is based on, obviously, the answers that you have correct, but I do appreciate that they give you some of those short text answers to explain some of your reasoning. So if you were to miss on the math because you did some quick math wrong and didn't move to decimal or did something wrong like that, you're going to be able to go in and explain your thinking and give the chatbot an opportunity to really understand what exactly you were thinking. And then that's how the person that's actually assessing your case down the road is going to make a decision on whether or not you're going the right way with it, even if you don't get the exact value right. And then on the recommendation, I think they're looking for you to be similar to a normal recommendation, just very short and succinct, but show that you have those communication skills. It's a little bit tougher when it's condensed down into that 1 to 2 minute recommendation, but I think that's an opportunity for you to really shine at the end, even if the online case up to that point hasn't gone the way you wanted it to.
Sure. That's helpful. One of the questions we get all the time is like, can I kind of flunk myself out of the entire, recruiting process if I like don't do well in the online case? How does BCG think about that? If you have, any insight to add? Like, is this, someone going to kind of be rejected based on their performance just purely in the online case, or is this just kind of one small data point within the larger assessment process?
I don't have exact insights into that. What I would say about it is that it's kind of both. There's definitely a way to probably flunk yourself out of the whole process if you do not take this seriously, and if you do not enter it with the correct mindset where you're treating it as though it's an interview case. On the other hand, it is also just a data point. Like, if you've done really well up to this point and you put in a good amount of effort to this case and at least show that you are committed and are learning how to case, then I think that you're going to be just fine. And that being said, I also think BCG understands where people are in the casing process. Like, they don't expect people to come into the online case with the same amount of preparation and the same amount of skills that they're going to come into a final round interview. Whenever those come up, like, there is an understanding that they're grading at kind of a curve here where people are still really figuring this out. So I wouldn't say to put too much emphasis on this, but take it seriously as though it will be a part of your candidate application, and do the best that you possibly could.
Shane, I appreciate that response. There's a lot of nuance and gray area here, and I think that was a great answer to the question. All right, let's get into how to prepare and do well at the BCG online case. So where do you recommend folks start with their preparation process? We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Yeah, I think the first area that you need to look at is really just where exactly you're struggling. So that's going to require you to really get into this and start doing some practice cases and understand what exactly is giving you the most trouble as you're trying to get through those first couple cases. This is early on in kind of the casing journey for a lot of candidates. So being able to quickly identify what exactly is causing you the most trouble and make sure that you can spend more time addressing that prior to getting into the online case is really beneficial. So I would just look to identify those areas of need and then create your own plan to determine exactly how to go about fixing those. There's definitely a lot of different ways to, look at each individual portion of the case and try to make effective practice drills out of that to work on those areas of need.
So it sounds like ideally people would have at least a couple of cases under their belt where they've gone through an actual case or a couple cases and kind of either did a self-assessment or had a friend or a former consultant or a professional coach kind of give some feedback, create at least somewhat of a plan to kind of hey, here's your gap areas that you really need to focus on in order to do well. Am I fairly close on that assessment?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the way that I thought about it was to try to do at least 2 or 3 cases between each second year or professional case with someone that's at the same skill level as me. So it didn't feel as intimidating at times, and you got to just kind of get some reps in. But it is really important to have, whether it's a second year, a firm representative, a professional case coach, to come in and be able to give you some valuable feedback that they can see through just having that experience.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And for folks listening, right, at Management Consultant, we have a team of former MBB consultants that would be more than happy to kind of be this person to kind of guide you through the process and give you that feedback and create a prep plan. So we'll put some links in the show notes where you can learn more about how to get in touch and learn more. So All right, Shane. Well, are there any resources that you used and found, really helpful in your prep process?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of different things that I tried out to try to mimic the flow of an actual case or the online case. I really think, Management Consultant does a great job in addition to having those resources from a professional caser standpoint to just have online drills that make it very easy to practice these things. So if you are going through a case and you realize that your case is taking a long time because your math is not going super, super quickly, or your math is not structured enough and it's hard to find numbers. The math drills that are on Management Consultant's site are very nice to just be able to really walk through that and time yourself, make sure that you're cutting down that time and cleaning up your math as much as possible. If you're more on the side of struggling with clarifying questions or setting up a framework, there's plenty of resources and brainstorming drills on the site as well to walk you through how exactly you should be thinking about those things. And so really thinking critically about your brainstorming aspects or framework aspects of the case, and making sure that you're coming up with ideas, because that really is a tough part of this online case, or the case in general, is being creative while structured. That was definitely where I needed the most help. And so that was something I relied on heavily. In addition, I think, going back and watching some case videos for the different firms that you're interested in, you can typically find some great examples on YouTube of just how to walk through different styles of cases, and seeing someone else walk through it rather than just seeing yourself is really beneficial, because you get to understand, like, okay, are they thinking about this in a way that I might not be thinking about it? And can I adopt some of those practices that they're using to improve my casing ability? So I would say, run through drills, watch videos, get as many reps as you can, and then also just practice as though you are going to do on the online case. So record yourself doing recommendations, try to go through math on, when it's just you and you're just sitting there staring at your paper. It's going to have a little bit different feel than what you would get in a normal case prep session. But I would say do a little bit of that, and then just also use normal case prep as a tool.
That's great. And I would assume that folks can use a free tool like Zoom or their phone app to kind of record themselves giving a recommendation. Or is there a different tool that you found useful in this?
I think you can use any sort of app or any sort of device that has recording functionality. I would say it's beneficial to watch yourself, like, one, to do it in front of the camera, and then two, to watch yourself and make sure that the way you think you're coming off and presenting yourself is actually how you're coming off and presenting yourself when you watch it back. You'll catch yourself saying things like, or doing those little things, and it can be nice to just see that up front and understand where you might be able to work on presenting yourself in a way that is very direct within that 1 minute, because you only get a minute of face time in this online case, and so it's even more important than it normally is in a regular case.
Yeah, you've only got a minute. Make sure you're prepared. Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel like is important for candidates to keep in mind during the prep process before the case?
I think we've hit most of it. I really do think the recommendation area is a big part of it, as well as just making sure that you have gotten to a point that you're comfortable with the areas that you are struggling at originally. You don't have to make them perfect. It just needs to be something that doesn't absolutely tank your case performance, so you can show your skills in other areas. I wouldn't over exaggerate the prep on those areas, but just make sure you're to a point where you feel comfortable that it's not going to affect your performance on the case overall.
Okay. And do you have any sort of recommendation for how much preparation folks would be wise to do on this? Is there, can you put X number of hours towards it, or is it different for each person?
I really think it's different for each person. It depends how much background you come in with on math or just creativity. Like, if you feel really comfortable in those things, you might not need as much. There's also really no way to know what kind of case you're going to encounter. So spending countless hours trying to understand industry dynamics and stuff like that is probably not beneficial. I would just say, use the tools as much as you need to feel comfortable sitting down in front of your computer when you go to take the online case, and just feel I have done the preparation that I need to feel comfortable going into this. It may, there may be some curveballs, but overall, I feel comfortable with what I have right now. I would also say that you don't want to become overwhelmed and over prepare for this case. It is important, but it at the same time is a singular data point in the overall application process. And they do understand that you have only been casing for, probably a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. And so that is totally understood. So don't become overwhelmed by this. I definitely put probably a little bit too much time into this last year, but it was what I needed to feel comfortable. So that's going to be different for everyone.
So take it seriously, but don't invest your whole life into it and over prepare for this. It's just one data point. That's great, Shane. Great. Is there anything you wish that you would have known, looking back last year when you were going through this, anything you wish you would have known going into it?
Yeah, I think one thing that just to think about maybe as you're preparing and going into the case is that you can't go back. There's going to be a series of questions. And so once you submitted your answer for a specific question, it's gone. It's kind of water under the bridge at that point. You need to just continue moving forward and not spend too much time thinking about it. And I think that also plays into thinking about the amount of time that you're allocating to each question. If you're spending a ton of time weighing two separate answers that are somewhat similar, I would say just make the choice based on your gut or whatever intuition you typically rely on, and move forward into the other parts of the case to make sure that you're not rushed at the end. You could run into a math problem that stumps you for a little bit, or run into a brainstorm where you feel like you really need to get your feet under you and understand the problem. So don't spend too much time on the minor details of questions. I think also just understanding that there are going to be a lot of correct answers. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but a lot of these answers are going to seem really great. Like there are going to be things that you might be like, oh yeah, I could use the market share here. But is that really the number one detail that you need to answer the question in the prompt? This is going to be very detail oriented, and the candidates that look for those details are going to do really well.
So testing candidates' ability to prioritize and focus on what's the most important, not just what would be nice to have, but what's the most critical factor. I think that's a very key.
Yeah, and I
skill.
think that's it's a consulting skill too down the road. It's something you're going to have to do as you move into leadership within consulting to determine. We could go a lot of different ways here with this project, but what 2 or 3 work streams are really going to actually benefit our client the most. They're looking for people that understand that kind of skill, and that's why this is the kind of benchmark for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Shane, I just had one more question pop into my mind here. What if someone doesn't get through the case in time? What happens then? Do you know? Will they still be asked to submit a 1-minute recommendation, or do you have any insight into that?
My understanding is that you still get to do the recommendation at the end. I am not 100% sure on this because the case format has changed, but I believe you have 35 minutes to get through the case with the recommendation at the end. My assumption, once again, not representing BCG in any way here, is probably that they just take wherever you got to in the case and evaluate you based on that. But yeah, I would definitely say try to get through as much as you can. Try to kind of get to a point where you feel comfortable with your answer. If you're going a little slow, and just get it submitted. It's better to at least have a try on there and get through all the questions than to be short on time. And also if you're short on time, you're probably starting to feel the heartbeat raising a little bit. It's not going to improve your performance. So just stay ahead of the clock. Try to feel comfortable with your answer, but don't spend way too much time on it.
That's helpful, Shane. Well, this has been great. I've learned a lot. I know our listeners will learn a lot from all this and from your experience, so thank you for sharing. Are there any final kind of closing thoughts or encouragements that you want to leave with our audience?
Yeah, a couple things. I think the first is that we talked about this being important, and although it is, this does not determine the outcome of your journey with BCG. I remember thinking that this was going to really determine whether or not I moved forward in the BCG process. It's one of a lot of factors that the company considers. So don't overreact to your performance or how it goes. And on top of that, I think that everybody thinks they did bad coming out of this case. I thought I did terrible. I was fully convinced that didn't even need to put any more time into BCG because there was no chance they were going to take me after my performance, and everything worked out perfectly. So this case is meant to test you. And so don't be surprised if you feel challenged by the case. That is what it is trying to do. And I guess finally, if it comes down to doing one more math drill versus going and clearing your head a little bit before the case, whether that's taking a walk or reading or whatever, take the time to clear your head and walk into this case feeling comfortable and prepared, and just make sure you're in the right headspace.
I love that, Shane. That's great perspective, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And right, we've heard from lots of folks that this is a pretty difficult case. But again, just as Shane has reminded us over and over, it's not the final say, and so take it seriously, but know that this isn't your only opportunity to stand out. Shane, really appreciate your perspective here, and I'm sure we'll see you around on another episode of Strategy Simplified very soon.
Yep, absolutely, David. Thanks for having me today.
If you'd like to work with a MBB coach to prepare for the BCG online case, BCG case interviews, or any other consulting firm's interview process, we'd love to help you through Black Belt. Black Belt is our premium case prep program, gives you a bunch of coaching sessions, an amazing set of online digital resources, gives you resume and cover letter edits to help you get the interview, and more. We run a cohort each month. We'd love to have you join. Link in the show notes to learn more and to register for Black Belt today. Thank you for joining this episode of Strategy Simplified, and we will catch you on another episode very soon.